Morning, everyone. We're just waiting a couple more minutes and then we'll get started. Oh, actually, we have about a minute. We'll start right at 11. All right, good morning and welcome to the PhD in Sustainability Science Information session. I'm Marilyn Jolino and I'm here with two of our staff, Amanda Smits and Erin Daly, who are going to help facilitate our session today. So thank you for joining us. First, I just want to say that Brock University acknowledges the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to work and live here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Indigenous and Inuit peoples, and acknowledging them reminds us that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of Indigenous people. And I welcome you to take the opportunity to acknowledge the land on which you're at, knowing that many of you are coming from many different parts of the globe to be with us today. So again, as I mentioned, I have Amanda and Erin here as well, and so we're all happy that you've joined us today. And at the end of the session, we'll have more of a kind of discussion about the questions that you might have. So we hope that it's not so formal, but I'll start with first going through some details about the PhD program, and then we'll give you the contact information and welcome you to ask us the questions that you have. So first, my background is in geography. So as a geographer, I'm often very interested in location, and I suspect you might be as well. So Brock University is located in the Niagara region of Ontario, Canada. We are right at that star on the map you see on the top left here, right south of Toronto, which is a major city that you might recognize if you're not familiar with this part of the world. We're also very close, like I want to say about a 15-minute drive to Niagara Falls, which is really exciting for us. So you can imagine our tourism industry is starting to come to life again. We are also in a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve, which is essentially a designated area that's seen as a fantastic learning environment for thinking about sustainability challenges that we face today. So the bottom right shows you an image of the Niagara Escarpment. There's many different natural features here in the Niagara region that make us quite different from other locations around the globe. The bottom left images show a winter and summer image of Teal House. That's the house that's situated here on campus. And this program is homed here in what we call the Environmental Sustainability Research Center. So we're a little house, a little center that's on main campus at Brock. And you can see that we're situated in a pretty gorgeous landscape here. And yeah, we enjoy it. It's quite an old house that's been renovated. It was originally built in 1837 and was home to the Teal family. So you're interested in sustainability science, so I thought maybe we would provide you with a definition of what we see as sustainability science. This is a fairly new discipline that's emerged over about the past 20 years, really, where you saw people starting to use this term in the early 2000s, and now we're talking a lot about sustainability science. And at its core, it's a transdisciplinary field, which means that we borrow from many disciplines and kind of break the boundaries between disciplines and welcome multiple perspectives in looking at sustainability challenges that we face and coming up with innovative solutions to those challenges. And there's two fundamental features about our program. One is that we focus on socially relevant problems and provide a solutions-oriented approach. And second is that we recognize that the research we do and the complex challenges that we're facing, climate change being one of them, requires input from various communities of knowledge. And that includes, from community partnerships that we have to, of course, Indigenous knowledge. So this transdisciplinary orientation to our program is really important to us. This is a slide with too much text, but I want you to be able to go over it after if you'd like to. So I wanted to give you as much information here as possible. That our program aim is really to cultivate a sustainable and equitable future by offering state-of-the-art education that, of course, takes place in a transdisciplinary research center, and we integrate scientific practice with our understanding of the connection between humans and their environment. So when I say that it's a transdisciplinary center, I mean that we all come from different academic backgrounds. I mentioned I'm a geographer, but we actually have faculty participating in our program that are, in the Faculty of Education, that are in Faculty of Math and Science, so from biologists to social scientists, like economists, sociologists, geographers, of course, that come together and engage with our program in terms of our teaching, in terms of our research, and our community partnerships. So we seek to develop world-class sustainability scientists who take a transdisciplinary approach to identifying those challenges that we face and then coming up with innovative solutions. And not just the innovative piece, the creative solutions, but also then how do we actually implement those creative solutions to some of the challenges that we face today. And, we think about those solutions as supporting decision-making, supporting policy development, and then thinking about enhancing practice, either locally or, thinking regionally all the way up to globally. So just to give you an example of some of the kinds of work that we're doing, some of the engagement activities, students in our programs do spend some time in the classroom as learners and also as in a more teaching role. So our grad program offers students an opportunity to work with faculty in a mentorship kind of role to also facilitate classroom teaching and learning. You also get experiences, depending on your research interests, either in a lab setting or out in the field, collecting field data. We also engage with partners and go out into the community and visit with our partners or hold meetings with our partners, like the bottom left graphic shows here. We have a partnership with the Vineland Innovation and Research Center, so we meet with them and our students as well. So students are given quite a few different opportunities to engage with people on campus as well as those off campus. And in some instances, even, across the globe. So we'll have virtual meetings as well, even outside of being in the current pandemic. An interesting little side note is that we have a community garden here located just outside of Teal House. that we have tended to in the past. And we means mostly Amanda Smits here has attended to, because she has a very green thumb. So we're very fortunate to have that as well. In terms of the progression through our Sustainability Science PhD program, this graphic that Erin kindly developed nicely shows how you would progress through the program through term 1 all the way to term 12. Typically, students take 4 years to make their way through the program. In the first term, that's a really important term where you're spending quite a bit of time on course-related activities, 7P01 and 7P03. And if you haven't got the background material, then you would also take our Foundations of Sustainability and our Methods course as well. Those are 5P01 and 5P02. Then in term 2, you would start putting together your supervisory committee. You would take some other courses. By term 3, you're looking at undertaking your comprehensive exam. Term 4, you're developing more fully your research proposal and submitting that. And then you launch into terms 5 to 11, where you're actually doing the writing of your dissertation. And then the last term, you're typically defending that body of work. So that's how you would progress through the program. Again, some more graphics to show you some of the research and activities of our program to date. This is the master's level work, because we are newly launching our PhD program, so it's an extra exciting time for you to be part of that. The one thing I would note is, most of you will be coming from a master's program. You want to think about explaining your background to a potential supervisor and letting them know, whether you've already had experiences writing a thesis in your past, whether you've written a major research paper, that, we still accept students into the program, whether they did, it depends really on their research interests, their background. So it's not just about whether you did a thesis already or not, but it's nice to share those experiences. Have you published any papers? That's really, really critical information to share with a supervisor. In any case, in our program, for many of you maybe who aren't from this part of the globe, it's nice for us to take time to get you out into the community. So the bottom part of this graphic, the bottom 2 pictures, show you an example of us working with our partner at Niagara Parks Commission, where they organized a trip for our students to explore the falls and other features along the Niagara Parkway. So we do try our best to also get you out and engaged with communities in many different ways, in terms of research, in terms of your learning, and just to also have a bit of fun at the same time, right? Okay, to give you now some specific details about funding. Many of you will have questions, of course, about funding. I want to note, as Amanda mentioned, that these slides will be available to you, and we'll send those to you by end of week, probably, at the email address you provided to us, so that you can actually go through and click these links to read all of the details about funding, tuition, awards or scholarships that you could be eligible for or that you could apply for. So we'll just go through some of the details around, should you be accepted into the program, then you would get a letter of offer of admission, where that offer letter would include information about 3 components of your funding package. The first would be a grad fellowship. That typically is in the amount of about $13,500 for those entering the PhD program. That's based on numbers from this current year, 21-22, and those are typically dispersed over 3 equal payments over 3 terms. Of course, you must be eligible for the funding, and those funds are applied to your tuition fees. The second pot of funding is a graduate assistantship, and that would be in the form of either a teaching assistantship or a research assistantship. This is a position that's paid employment, and we facilitate that. The grad program director, which is myself at the moment, we affectionately refer to that person as the GPD. They facilitate that funding in your first year, and then you apply for that funding in subsequent years. And we typically have a max of hours that students work on campus, and the rationale for that is so that you can spend time focused on your research, right? And coursework as well, but primarily on your research. The last pool of funding that would be explained in that offer letter, potentially, depending on your average, for example, coming into the program, would be the internal scholarships, like the Dean's Excellence Scholarship would be a good example of that. As PhD students, you would also potentially have access to external funding, and I just give 3 examples here of Shared OGS and NSERT. Typically, before you even apply to the program, you could apply to secure that funding and then come to the program with that funding, or you could apply, often it happens in the first term of study. And there are many other pools of funding that would be available to you. What's really important for you to note is that any of that funding, internal or external funding, depends on whether you're a full-time or part-time student, whether you're a domestic student or an international student. So just keep that in mind, that you will have eligibility criteria that you would need to meet to have access to that award or scholarship funding. Okay, next is the admission criteria and your application checklist. And I want to note that the application deadline is January 14, so there's still time for you to ask us questions. Even if you don't think of one, for the session here today, you can reach out, of course, in a week or 2 if you have questions, right? Or down the line if you have questions. Typically, we're looking for you to meet some minimum criteria for admission. That includes a master's degree or its equivalent from an accredited university. And again, I note that that's, a major research paper route or thesis route, you can still apply to the program. That's very customary for at least Canadian universities, where we don't typically stipulate that you have to have come from one or the other. I think what's important for you to note in your application is, if you did an MRP as an example, what does that look like, right? You might have published a paper or 2, so those are important details that you would want to share in your statement of intent, for example, would be a good spot for that. Similarly, if you did a thesis, did you, what format did that look like? Was that in the form of manuscripts for publication or not? You could talk about that with a potential supervisor as well. You want to make sure that you have at least a minimum average of 80%. And then note, sorry, that's not over the last 2 years of undergrad study. That's over your master's degree. And then lastly, if there is a proficiency in English requirement, so just make note of that. And then fourth, you want to make sure that you have agreement in principle that an ESRC core faculty member is available and willing to supervise your work should you be accepted to the program, right? So first, you want to ensure, if you're going through this checklist, you want to make sure that you satisfy the minimum criteria. Knowing that there are many students applying to the program, you'll want to make sure that you meet that bare minimum but that doesn't guarantee you position in our program. Secondly, you want to make sure that you've included all of this material in your application and by the deadline of January 14. That includes a curriculum vitae, a written statement of intent, the name of just one core faculty member that is required for the application, that would supervise your work. And I say in principle. And what that means in principle is that the faculty member says, you know, I see some alignment of your interests with my interests. Should you be accepted into the program, I could potentially work with you, right? That's not a guarantee of admission. They may say to 3 different students that they would, in principle, agree to supervise your work. That doesn't mean you'd be admitted to the program because of them agreeing to that, to serve in principle. So just bear that in mind. They're saying it's possible, but you have to actually be admitted to the program first. So we've got a listing of core faculty that you can look through, and there's a link provided there on this slide. And then I note that our availability is also shown. So please do not reach out to faculty who've indicated that they are not available to supervise PhD students in fall 2022. Next, you're required to provide 3 academic references, then official transcripts, and of course, the proof of English proficiency. And then of course, you have to submit the application and pay the application fee. So just to go back for a moment, I want to talk about the first 2 items, your CV or your resume. You know, when you're thinking about listing, you should list existing scholarships or awards that you received. And when you do that, make sure you do explain why you were the recipient of that award, right? So was it for academic excellence? Were you the top graduating student in your class? You want to make sure that you provide those kinds of details rather than just list the name of the award. When it comes to your written statement of intent, I want to note that we are explicit about what you want to include in that letter, and it's really important that you speak to your research interests and how they're aligned with the faculty member that you will be working with or you hope to be working with if you are accepted into the program. Okay.
Marilyn, we did get one question about the letter. I just thought maybe this was a
Sure.
good time to ask.
Yeah.
Eric asks, what is the maximum length of the letter of intent?
The maximum length, I believe it's 2 pages.
I'm pretty sure it states it right in the...
It states it in the application, the steps in the application will confirm that, but I'm pretty sure that's 2 pages. Single spaced would be fine, but you don't want to, you want to make sure it's legible, of course, and you want to make sure it's very clear what your research interests are and how they're aligned with the faculty member that you've identified in your application.
There's one other question from Eric about references. Should we ask it now?
Sure.
If I've been out of school for a while, can I use a professional reference as one of the references?
That's a great question, and we'll get back to you on that one, but I'm pretty sure that it is possible to have one of the references serve as a professional reference. We do realize that often students do come from a professional background and have been out of academia for some time. But let me double check on that one, and if we could just note his name, and I'll double check that one for you, Eric. Thank you. The page length?
It doesn't say on our website. I'm just double checking with the like just kind of comparing it to the SAS requirements.
Okay.
We can answer that though in the email that we send everyone.
Yeah. I would say 2 pages. So beyond that, yeah, I think you can nicely summarize that in 2 pages. Okay, thank you for your questions, that's great, and we'll take more shortly. Just wanted to share with you, and in no particular order, so we've got these listed alphabetically, were some of the potential career paths that students could take, right? Students often ask that question, right? Well, you know, if I undertake a PhD, I'll probably need to go into academia, and that's simply not the case. There are many PhDs that are employed in government agencies, for example, and other organizations, third sector organizations as well, not-for-profits. So keep that in mind. You, of course, could be looking at then a postdoctoral experience after your PhD, and then you may have your eye on an academic career, but that doesn't have to be the sole career path that you choose, right? So do bear that in mind. I went to school myself at the University of Waterloo with many colleagues that did not end up employed in academia. Some of them did, of course, but some of them, many of them, ended up in government, working for Environment Canada, etc., right? Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, and in other organizations. So it's not just to pursue a career in the academy. Some of the sample research areas that we're interested in, and these are very broad areas of research, we realize that, but our core faculty in the Environmental Sustainability Research Center here at Brock are primarily focused on issues around research around climate change, natural resource management, sustainability science, of course, and water, natural resource management, monitoring, and evaluation. We have a Canada Research Chair, for example, who's focused on water resources, governance issues, resilience. So there's, lots of different topics of research that you could pursue. And again, I encourage you to visit our faculty and staff page where, and the core listing of faculty, where you can learn more about the research interests of individuals. You cannot see current PhD students, but you can at least get an idea of some of the research that's been done at the master's level by perusing through our list of current students as well as our alumni. So that'll give you a nice sense, especially because we include information about who worked with these students. Then you can get an idea of what projects have been undertaken in the past to learn more about if you see there's some kind of alignment in terms of your research interests with a particular faculty member. When you're thinking about working with and contacting a faculty member, I would carefully consider who you're contacting rather than contacting everybody in the center, right? And be very specific about your research interests with that faculty member. I think that will help you to secure someone who would say, yes, in principle, I would work with you if you were accepted into the program. Rather than have a broad statement that covers multiple research areas that are undertaken by many faculty in the center. That's my personal advice to you. I am sure many of you have questions for us. So I'll just end on this slide here and encourage you to reach out to us at our email, ssci@rocku.ca, if you think of any questions. And yeah, we'll open the floor now for any questions that you might have for us.
Yeah, I just add one thing before I get to our first question here, Marilyn. We're also on LinkedIn now, so you can kind of see some of the professional development events that we offer through the year at Brock U ESRC, and we're also on Instagram as well. So our first question is from Joseph. They say, hi there, does the program allow for part-time studies for students who wish to pursue careers in sustainability at the same time?
Yes, so we typically talk about full-time students, but we do typically engage part-time students as well at Brock. So that's something that would have to be a discussion ahead of time, right, with your supervisor and principal, and with me as grad program director. Would be a good idea as well to talk about that first. So you could also reach out to me, Joseph, individually and have that conversation. The program is set up for typically full-time students, but at Brock we do have students that come in on a part-time basis as well.
We haven't gotten any other questions, but I would encourage anyone who may have a question to submit one. Chances are if you're thinking it or not sure, somebody else is also not sure, so we'd be more than happy to welcome any other questions that you may have. If not, we can wrap up, and we'll be sure to send you the presentation, the PDF of the presentation from today to anyone who RSVP'd, as well as a link to this recording so that you can go back and watch anything again that you might have a question about. Yeah, we don't have any, oh, here's one. Okay, we have another question from Bridget. It says, is the graduate assistantship guaranteed for all 4 years?
That's a great question. And actually, thank you, Bridget, because you're reminding me to mention that the TA portion of funding involves a union as well. So you would be part of a union. But typically, in the first 2 terms of study, you're essentially placed into a TA-ship, or potentially placed into a TA-ship that is guaranteed to you. You have to be qualified, obviously, but we place you into that. And then thereafter, you can apply to TA positions at Brock. And what's really important to note, and you can find the collective agreement, or we can provide that to you in our materials as well for that. It's QP 4207 Unit 1 for TAs, that graduate students, and in particular PhD students, are given preference in hiring. So it's not as difficult for a PhD student to secure those positions, but they're not guaranteed. But the first 2 terms we do provide those. The other piece is that we often employ our students as research assistants, and that's, again, employment income, and so you need to be eligible to access any employment income at Brock. And so you could be working as a research assistant instead of a teaching assistant. Just a note about employment in Canada and eligibility, that if you are interested in TA or RA positions, and usually students are, because that's a really important piece of how you get your funding, that to be eligible for employment, you must pass through a port of entry into Canada, you must have a social insurance number, and you must have a Canadian bank account in your name. And then you can have access to that funding. Great question, Bridget. Thank you.
We haven't gotten any other questions, Marilyn.
Okay.
Yeah, but we would welcome, if you do have any and you just weren't comfortable asking, you can send any questions to ssci@brocku.ca, and either Erin or myself or Marilyn will get back to you with the answers. Sometimes it takes us a few days, so we ask you to give us 3 to 5 days to respond.
All right, well, I just want to take the time to thank all of you for participating in our info session today, and encourage you to reach out to us with other questions that you have. All right, thank you. Have a great day.